Hey everybody, welcome back once again to Answers on Eschatology. My name is Dan Derry and I'm the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. We are in the midst of a study on Matthew chapter 24, and we've been looking at verse 14 and sharing some thoughts regarding the Great Commission and the gospel of the kingdom. Now, we need to understand that the message of the Great Commission, was the gospel of the kingdom. But the gospel of the kingdom, the good news of the kingdom, was that the kingdom would be established in the lifetime of Jesus' first century generation. Matthew 16, 27 and 28. Therefore, the message and the proclamation of the Great Commission was that the kingdom would be established in the lifetime of Jesus' first century generation. Listen, this places the Great Commission in the first century as a first century message for a first century establishment of the kingdom. That's what the Great Commission was about. It was them preaching the good news that the kingdom was coming in their lifetime, and they were to spread that good news with the entire known world of that time, and give them the opportunity to enter the kingdom before the end of the Old Covenant age and before the end of Old Covenant Judaism. Okay? Now, what I want to do is I want to demonstrate that not only did Jesus pronounce and prophesy the establishment of the kingdom in the first century in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, but that was by no means an isolated prophecy. Over and over and over again, Jesus teaches and proclaims, sometimes very clearly, sometimes more subtly, okay? But Matthew chapter 21 is one of those, another one of those texts which Jesus placed his coming and the establishment of the Messianic kingdom in the lifetime of his first century generation, okay? Let's go with me to Matthew chapter 21, and let's take a look at this. This is the parable. We're going to look at verses 33 to 45, and this is the parable of the husbandman and the vine growers. So Matthew chapter 21, and let's read starting in verse 33. Listen to another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard and put a wall around it and dug a winepress in it and built a tower and rented it out to vine growers and went on a journey. Now, this parable, it is taken from Isaiah chapter 5 and the parable of the Israel, the Lord's vineyard. This is a parable spoken against Israel, and the Jews understood it. We'll see that. Watch this. So when the time of harvest approached, he sent his slaves to the vine growers to receive his produce. The vine growers took his slaves, beat one, killed another, and stoned a third. Again, he sent another group of slaves, larger than the first, and they did the same thing to them. But afterwards he sent his sons, saying, "They will respect my son." But the vine growers saw the son. They said among themselves, "This is the heir. Come, let us kill him and seize his inheritance." They took him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those vine growers? They said, so the scribes and the Pharisees said, he will bring those wretches to a wretched end and will rent out the vineyard to other vine growers who will pay him his proceeds at the proper seasons. In verse 43, Jesus says, "Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you and given to a people producing the fruit thereof." And in verse 45, when the chief priests and Pharisees heard this parable, they understood he was speaking about them. Now catch this. This parable is a parable against Israel. Israel was the Lord's vineyard who had shed the blood of the prophets. They had shed the blood of those who had been sent to them previously, and they were about to shed the blood of the Son, the heir of the vineyard. And Jesus said that in judgment of those who would kill him, he would come and take the kingdom from them and give it to a people producing the fruit thereof. And they understood all of that to be speaking about them. Verse 45. Okay, but here's what we need to understand. Jesus placed the establishment of the kingdom, okay, the kingdom being taken from Old Covenant Israel and being given to a nether people at his coming, when he came to judge those who had shed the blood of the prophets and who had shed his own blood. Now, go with me to Matthew chapter 23, and we will see where Jesus places that coming, his coming, in vengeance upon Israel for shedding innocent blood. Matthew 23, and let's look at verse 31 and following. So you testify against yourselves that you are the son of those who murder the prophets. Fill up then the measure of your father's guilt. You serpents, you brood of vipers, how will you escape the sentence of hell? Therefore, behold, I am sending you prophets and wise men and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will scourge in your synagogues and persecute from city to city, so that upon you, these are his first century generation, the leaders of Old Covenant Israel, that upon you may fall the guilt of all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Jesus said all of the blood, all of the righteous blood shed would come, the guilt of that blood would come upon his first century generation, the Jews of that generation who were guilty of shedding that blood. But Matthew chapter 21 says that bloodshed, the vengeance of that bloodshed, would come upon Old Covenant Israel at the coming of the Lord, when the Lord would remove the kingdom from Old Covenant Israel and give it to a new people. That happened in AD 70 at the destruction of Jerusalem and the judgment of Old Covenant Israel for shedding innocent blood. This is the gospel of the kingdom. This is the fulfillment of the gospel of the kingdom. Remember, Matthew 16 says, 16, 27 and 28, that in the lifetime of Jesus' first century generation, the Lord would come and establish his kingdom. Matthew 21, Jesus said he would come, establish his kingdom, remove it from Old Covenant Israel, give it to a new people at the time when he came to vindicate his own murder and the murder of his prophets, the shedding of innocent blood. Matthew chapter 23, 30 and following, Jesus places that coming, that vindicative judgment upon Israel for shedding innocent blood in his first century generation. That is when the kingdom of God was established and the Son of Man came in judgment upon Old Covenant Israel. Listen, that is the gospel of the kingdom. That is the gospel that was proclaimed to all the world and to every nation before the end of the Old Covenant age. And listen, once again, that places the message of the Great Commission, which was the gospel of the kingdom, that places that message in a first century context. It places it at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, at the coming of the Lord, to establish the kingdom of God at the end of the Old Covenant age. Well, that's all for this time, guys. Hopefully that's tied a few pieces together. We'll say more on the Great Commission and the gospel of the kingdom next time on Answers on Eschatology. Bye for now.